Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Rachel and this is Shipwrecked Library, and today I'm bringing you my Eye of the World review that I am so excited to do. So for those of you who don't know what the Eye of the World is, it's the first book in a 14-book series known as the Wheel of Time series, which in broad strokes is a high fantasy novel series about good versus evil. Recently, it's been picked up by Amazon to be turned into a TV show, kind of along the lines of The Witcher or the Game of Thrones series. So I can see why a lot of people are going to be interested in it, and maybe you're thinking about trying to read it themselves. As someone who just finished the book and is now on to the second book, I would really like to give you my thoughts on it. I'm gonna break my review down into parts just to make it a little bit easier. And the first one we're gonna start with is it worth it? So when starting a series like Wheel of Time, which is 14 books, 15 including the prequel, you really need to know if you're actually going to get the payoff that you think you deserve. As someone who's only read the first book and is only a quarter way into the second book, I can't 100% guarantee you that this is going to be a fantastic series because I haven't finished it yet. But I can give you my newbie perspective, which I think is an interesting look at the series because a lot of the people you talk to who are into Wheel of Time have already finished the series or are halfway through or almost done with it. But I just finished it, I have fresh thoughts on it, and I'm also thoroughly invested in the series already after having just read The Eye of the World. So the whole series is 4 million words all together, each book ranging from 600 to 1,000 pages. So it's definitely a commitment, and you really need to think about whether or not you want to start that commitment. So in this review, I'm going to really be talking about the type of reader who should be picking this book up rather than trying to sell you on it. I don't want people to pick up a 700-page novel and be disappointed at the very end of it and not want to read it any longer. This first book is a very simple journey novel, which I think a lot of fantasy readers will already be familiar with. The Eye of the World is about 3 boys in a small village, and their village is attacked one day by these almost mythical-like creatures that no one thought actually existed called Trollocs. And this mysterious duo named Moraine and Lan come to them and tell them basically, you're the reason your village has been attacked and we need to get you out of here, and then we can figure out why the Trollocs are trying to hunt you. The boys Mat, Perrin, and Rand, as well as 2 women, Nynaeve and Egwene, and a traveling gleeman, which is an entertainer in this world, all journey together to get away from their village to protect it, as well as figuring out why they're being hunted. I think this book did a lot in building foundation for the rest of the series, and I think that that can be difficult for some people because it feels like a whole lot of nothing might be happening throughout the series or throughout the book. It's 700 pages and there is just a lot of traveling that goes on. Of course, everyone's together at the beginning and then split off into their separate groups, and through those separate groups you sort of find out different parts of the world and different information through all 3 points of views that you wouldn't find out if they were all together. During the journey, we're fed information about the world in ways that I think are really interesting. The characters meet a lot of different characters who tell them stories, and then you get internal monologue from all of the characters sort of explaining certain things. Whenever they go to a new area, Moraine, this enigmatic, mysterious enchantress, in this world it's called an Aes Sedai, tells them about, times past and stories and myths and legends that are all actually true. We learn about the magic system, the one power and the true source. We learn about the religions as well as Aes Sedai, which like I said are the enchantress, and then the warders who are their guardians of sort. You really find out more than you think you're finding out all throughout the story because while they're traveling, it's all being told to you. So you have action happening as they're going from point A to point B and different conflicts are happening. But you're also learning so much about this world, which is perfect for the first book because it's really all about Jordan telling us and explaining to us what we're getting into, what we have in store for the rest of the series. This is something to really bear in mind if you're going to be starting this book. There is a lot of world building. It's not super character focused and it's not even super plot focused. It's really an introduction into the series and really what it should be known as. It's like the pilot of a new TV show almost. It's there to grab you with its initial interests, like who are the Aes Sedai? What is Rand actually? At first I was really nervous to pick this book up because I thought that it would be difficult, but I think that's really like a gatekeeping kind of term. I talked about it in my last video where a lot of the times we talk about these big epic fantasies like Wheel of Time, Dune, etc. in such difficult terms that it scares people off from reading them. I think anyone can read this book so long as you're the type of reader to enjoy this type of book. It's a long epic journey over 700 pages where there's heavy world building, lots of lore, lots of magic system, and if that's something you sound interested in, then it's definitely the book for you. But if you're someone who's much more interested in action, character development, character interaction, intense stuff like that, it's not gonna be the book for you. So I know I've already said it a million times, but this is a 14-book series, and this is the first book in the 14-book series. So the characters are a little rough around the edges. I think that they're sketches of what the characters are going to become. And in book 1, they're not going to be anything like they're going to be in book 14, but that's what you hope, right? If you're starting a book, the first book in a series, you read the rest of the series, you don't want the characters to stay stagnant. And that's what's most exciting about this, I think. When I was reading The Eye of the World, they definitely felt, the characters, they definitely felt a little shoehorned into their traits a little bit. For example, Matt is the comedic relief, Perrin is the big soft boy, and Rand in particular really suffers from Chosen One syndrome. But if you're someone like me, you're reading the first book in a series and you're reading these characters, you're not so much thinking who these characters are right now, you're seeing the potential and who they're going to become, the journey that they can go on. And despite them being pretty rough sketches, I found myself getting very quickly attached to some of the characters, like Egwene, who is a young woman from the village that was attacked at the very beginning of the novel. I found her to be fierce and interesting, and I really enjoyed the seed that's planted with her character in book 1 because I know that fantastic stuff is going to happen in the rest of the series, and that's what you're really getting out of The Eye of the World. You're not so much getting fully fleshed out interesting characters as you are getting the ideas of these characters and picking ones that you really enjoy, knowing later on something crazy is going to happen to them. I do think that the characters take a bit of a backseat to the world and the complex world building that's within it, but that only made me more curious about what's going to happen with these characters once I already know them. And this is a review for The Eye of the World, but I am reading The Great Hunt, which is the second book, and I'm about 25% in, and I can already say that knowing the characters as I do now is making it more exciting to read about them. I think Rand in particular was the one who suffered the most from his tropes. He is the obvious protagonist, the chosen one, he's special, and he felt a little shoehorned by it. But I think that Jordan's going to do a really good job with that character trope. No one spoil me if he does or he doesn't. And another character I felt very interested by was Moiraine. She is this mysterious, enigmatic, is she good or is she evil kind of character. I wish that I was reading the series as it was coming out because I think that that would be really interesting. I already know a lot about her, having already seen memes on the internet. In that first book, she has this aura about her that is so palpable on the pages that I just found her so interesting, and her motives are so unclear. And speaking of Moiraine, in particular, I was really impressed by the cast of female characters, all of whom have this incredibly strong feeling about them. Not to say that fragile or weak female characters can't be good characters as well. I just think that when you're going to be reading a fantasy novel set in the 90s by a man, sometimes, naturally, as a female reader, you can be a little bit nervous about what might happen to these characters. But I found it really refreshing to read about these female characters who are fierce and individualized and independent and strong and all different from each other too. So our main female characters, Moiraine, Nynaeve, and Egwene, none of them feel the same. I can be reading from each of them or about each of them and know that I'm reading from them. They're not cardboard cutouts of each other, which are sometimes the way female characters do feel in fantasy novels that were written from a long time ago. A long time ago. I was born in the 90s. Moiraine as a character is never doubted in regards to her strength or her power. She's never underestimated. No one ever thinks, no, she can't really actually do this, etc. Like, she's a badass and everyone's like, yeah, don't mess with her. So Robert Jordan's writing is not something that I would categorize as simplistic because that sounds almost offensive or negative, but it is very straightforward and very easy to grasp in this first novel. He has a very blunt and to the point way of writing that I definitely appreciated because it made it easier to read a lot at a time. Usually with fantasy you can get I should speak for myself. Usually with fantasy, I can get a little bit daunted reading all of that at once, you know, but I found reading Eye of the World, I was blowing out 20-30 pages in one sitting with no problem. He doesn't have an overly floral prose. He's not inundating his paragraphs with lots of metaphors and similes. Nothing feels really bogged down by heavy descriptions. We don't get huge maps overlaying the entire cities that they're in, as well as describing architecture on top of describing atmosphere, setting, etc. But that doesn't mean that his writing is plain, nor does it feel like the writing leaves something to be desired. I didn't feel like I was reading this like clinical writing of like just two people going somewhere. I don't know if that made sense. He gets his point across really well. And he does dialogue pretty fantastic too. It has that classic high fantasy medieval feel to it where they talk a little bit funny, but it's really investing you into the story, or pulling you into the story, I should say. I found his writing almost to be hypnotic. Once I started, I just kept going. Although it is third person, I wouldn't necessarily categorize it as third person limited, nor would I say it's third person omniscient. It's sort of like this bird's eye view, and we're in a character's point of view, but it slowly gets tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter on the scene. So we start out with this broad strokes and slowly zoom in on whatever character who's talking to us, essentially. I think that he wields that perfectly to make certain scenes very tense and some scenes just flow a little bit more naturally. So I don't know if you can see, but I have little tabs in here. And those tabs are actually the scenes in which Jordan was writing nightmare scenes. I don't want to spoil the Eye of the World at all, but there are scenes in which characters are having nightmares about this antagonist known as Baalzamon, and they were terrifying. I thought that his writing was the best in those scenes, and it was so different from what he was writing outside of the nightmares that when you were reading a scene that was clearly this horrific night terror, it felt very high stakes and scary. Like I said when describing the plot, the world is something that's heavily focused on in the Eye of the World, and I think it's interesting. For one, it doesn't have a name. We have no idea what this world they're in is called, nor do we know what continent they're on or country in. They're basically talking about cities, and that's kind of about it. We get a good, nice, pretty map in the beginning of the book that I never reference because I don't do that, but still, it's there if you want it. But the world itself, I felt I grasped it really well in the Eye of the World. I think that Jordan did a really great job of telling me exactly what this world is about. I don't necessarily think it is the most unique in terms of fantasy. I mean, it's a medieval fantasy. There's knights, there's sheep herders, etc., blacksmiths, princesses, what have you. But I still feel like this did a great job of differentiating itself. There's a tagline on the book that says Jordan came to finish what Tolkien started, and I definitely agree with that. He is really building this broad world to put these characters in, and I've said it before, I'm saying it again, but it's the first book in a 15-book series. And if Jordan can write this first book and already have you really grasping and understanding what this world and the magic system and all the political dynamics that go on in it in just this first book alone, I can't imagine how great the rest of the series is going to become in regard to that. This last section is just dedicated to my advice when starting this story. I think that the best thing you can do for yourself is have an open mind and know when you first start this story if it's going to be for you or not. You can really tell. It's a long book and the characters take a backseat to the world building. Like I said, the plot is kind of complex and oddly structured but interesting, and you really have to understand that you're starting a series that's going to be 4 million words. You need to have a little bit of leniency with this first book. My other advice would really be to join the Wheel of Time fandom in safe places where you won't get spoiled for things. My favorite part about reading this book was, not to plug my friend's Discord, but talking on Discord with my friend Ridima and all of my other friends who like Wheel of Time. People who are into this series are into this series, and they're really excited to hear new people get into it and talk about it. They like to hear their theories, they like to hear thoughts. So if you find a good group of people, it doesn't necessarily have to be my friend's Discord, but really anyone, I think that you can find people who are going to make you feel enthusiastic about reading this because they're enthusiastic about you reading this. At its core, the Wheel of Time fandom is something fun. You always have to be careful when joining fandom spaces, curate it to yourself and what you need, but there's so many people and it is such a diverse fandom that you can have a lot of fun. That would really be my number one advice, is find people to talk to about this book, because it is such a huge story that it becomes more enjoyable when you can spit it out with people. My other very important advice is to not rush this book, or any of the books, or the series itself. You really need to take your time. When I was reading The Eye of the World, I felt pressured to finish it in a certain amount of time because I needed it to be in my wrap-up because I'm a booktuber. But I stopped doing that and I just let myself read it whenever I felt the urge or the need or the want to read it, and that was way more enjoyable. If you shove this story down your throat and try and cram it into your brain as quick as possible, you're gonna hate it because it is convoluted and strange and weird and complex and has a lot of layers and a lot of different characters and a lot of weird fantasy names, etc. So if you try too hard to finish this series as quickly as you can to either get to the TV show that's going to be coming out, or because you want to feel accomplished because you finished this, or because you want to make Wheel of Time content if you're a content creator, you're not going to have fun and you're gonna end up hating it. And I've seen a lot of people express those sort of concerns before where they're like, I'm just not enjoying this right now. Then put it down and come back to it when you feel like you're going to enjoy it. This is definitely a series that I think needs to be savored and not binged all in one go. That being said, I'm probably going to binge the entire series in this year. But that's because I'm enjoying it. Okay, that's it. I'm wrapping it up here. Thank you so much for clicking on this video, you guys. I really appreciate it. Hopefully you took something out of this video and you enjoyed it. I really hope I convinced you to read this book if you're the type of reader who thinks they'd enjoy this book. And if you did end up liking this video, don't forget to hit like, comment, and subscribe for more Wheel of Time content that I hopefully will be putting out soon. Okay, thanks guys. Bye.